Welcome to Top 10 Amazing Facts. Today we're diving into the incredible story of the fall of the walls of Jericho. Here are 10 incredible facts surrounding this mysterious event, wrapped in faith, archaeology, and ancient warfare. Was it a miracle? Or something else? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more fascinating journeys into the past. Number 1. The City of Jericho, the oldest city on Earth. Long before skyscrapers and modern warfare, there was Jericho, a city nestled in the Jordan Valley near the Dead Sea. Archaeologists believe Jericho is one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world, with evidence of settlements dating back to 9000 BCE. It was a walled city, strategically placed along trade routes and surrounded by fertile land, making it a prime target for conquest. Jericho's walls weren't just symbolic, they were massive. Think multi-tiered defenses, stone retaining walls, mud brick barriers, and an earthen rampart. Some parts stood nearly 46 feet tall. Number 2. The Israelites' arrival. According to the book of Joshua, the Israelites had just spent 40 years wandering in the desert after their escape from Egypt. Under the leadership of Joshua, Moses' successor, they finally crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land, and the mighty city of Jericho stood in their way. To the Israelites, it looked impenetrable, but Joshua wasn't about to launch a full-scale assault, at least not in any conventional sense. Number 3. The divine battle plan. Instead of battering rams or siege towers, God gave Joshua a divine strategy. The instructions? March around the city once a day for 6 days with all the armed men. The Ark of the Covenant, symbolizing God's presence, was carried by priests, and 7 priests blew rams' horns as they walked. On the 7th day, they were to march around the city 7 times, then blow the horns, and the people were to shout. Sounds more like a spiritual ritual than a battle plan, right? Number 4. The walls came tumbling down. On that 7th day, after completing the final lap, the priests blew their horns, and the people shouted with all their might. According to the Bible, the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites rushed in, taking the city without a traditional fight. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 30 says it best, "By faith the walls of Jericho fell down." This wasn't a military victory, it was a spiritual one. Obedience and the trust in God were the real weapons. Number 5. Rahab the spy, the unexpected hero. Rahab, a Canaanite woman, played a key role in the story. She hid 2 Israelite spies and helped them escape. In return, Joshua promised her protection. When the walls fell, Rahab and her family were spared, and she later became part of the lineage of King David, and even Jesus. Interesting fact, archaeological evidence shows a part of the wall remained standing, possible where Rahab lived. Number 6. Jericho was burned after its walls fell. According to Joshua chapter 6 verse 24. Then they burned the whole city and everything in it. But they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. After the walls of Jericho collapsed and the Israelites entered the city, they set it on fire, destroying homes, goods, and buildings. This was part of the divine instruction. Jericho was to be completely devoted to destruction as an offering to God. This kind of offering was known in Hebrew as herem, meaning something devoted or banned, often indicating total destruction for religious purposes. Why burn the city? Religious obedience. Joshua and the Israelites were following direct instructions from God. Burning was a way to purify or consecrate something to God. It prevented any potential rebellion or reoccupation of the city. Interesting fact, archaeological digs at ancient Jericho or Tel es Sultan have uncovered burn layers dating to the late Bronze Age, collapsed mud brick walls, charred remains of grain stores, suggesting a sudden fiery destruction right after harvest, aligning with the biblical claim that Jericho was destroyed quickly and not over a long siege. Number 7. A curse was placed on Jericho. Joshua issued a solemn curse against anyone who would try to rebuild the city. Joshua chapter 6 verse 26. Cursed before the Lord is the man who undertakes to rebuild this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son will he lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest will he set up its gates. This meant Jericho was not to be rebuilt. and doing so would bring tragedy. Number 8. The fall of Jericho marked a new beginning. The fall of Jericho was the first major military victory for the Israelites in the land of Canaan. After 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, Jericho symbolized the start of a new chapter, from nomads to a conquering nation with a home. Up to this point, the Israelites had relied on miracles for survival, manna from heaven, water from rocks, and divine protection. But Jericho introduced them to a new phase, active conquest. They were now responsible for fighting battles, claiming territory, and enforcing God's laws, all under Joshua's leadership. It marked their coming of age as a nation. God had told Moses and Abraham that the Israelites would inherit a land flowing with milk and honey. The fall of Jericho was proof that God was keeping his word, and that faith, obedience, and courage would lead to victory. The ritual march, the blowing of trumpets, and the obedient silence of the people created a template for spiritual warfare, showing that success didn't depend on numbers or weapons, but on faith and obedience. Future battles like Gibeon and the defeat of the Amorite kings were built on this foundation. It also marked a shift in how the Israelites were perceived. To themselves, they were no longer just descendants of slaves, they were God's army. To their enemies, the surrounding nations were now terrified. Joshua chapter 6 verse 27 says, "So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land." In Christian theology, Jericho's fall is often seen as a symbolic breaking of strongholds, the walls we build around our hearts, or the sins that separate us from God. Its collapse is a metaphor for new spiritual beginnings through faith and obedience. Jericho's fall was more than just the destruction of a city, it was the birth of a nation's destiny. Number 9. Archaeology versus the Bible, what's the evidence? In the 1930s, British archaeologist John Garstang excavated Jericho and found evidence of the collapsed walls, validating the biblical account. Then, in the 1950s, Kathleen Kenyon conducted further digs and argued the walls had already fallen centuries before Joshua's arrival, possibly around 1550 BCE, long before the traditional biblical timeline of 1400 to 1200 BCE. So who's right? The debate continues, but here's what most archaeologists agree on. Jericho's walls really did collapse suddenly, and parts of the city show evidence of burning, consistent with the biblical description. Number 10. Jericho today. What's left? Today, the ancient city of Jericho, or Tel Es Sultan in the West Bank, still holds some of the oldest known fortifications in human history, dating back to around 8000 BCE. What remains today are mud brick foundations, stone retaining walls, and trench outlines that hint at the city's complex defense systems. The most famous structure is now a low mound of rubble and stone, partially reconstructed for preservation and tourism. The site is open to tourists and scholars, with interpretive signage, guided tours, and ongoing digs. It's part of a broader UNESCO World Heritage nomination effort, highlighting Jericho's role in early urban development. While the exact location of the biblical wall collapse is debated, standing there, surrounded by centuries of dust and stone, you can't help but feel something monumental happened here. So was the fall of Jericho a divine miracle, a brilliant psychological tactic, or a perfectly timed earthquake? We may never know for sure, but the story endures because it speaks to something powerful. Faith in the impossible, hope in adversity, and the idea that sometimes it's not brute force that wins the day, but belief. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient history and biblical mystery, hit that like button, subscribe for more incredible facts, and turn on your notifications. See you next time on Top 10 Amazing Facts.